All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Tides of Business. We have an amazing guest here today. It is Jake Phillips with Biota. I'm going to have him tell us a little bit about his incredible journey of getting into aquaculture and then what he actually does at Biota and a little bit about aquaculture in general. So welcome to the show, Jake.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. We are so excited to have you. So for those who might not be familiar with what you actually do at Biota, what is kind of a general high-level concept of what you do as the general manager of Florida Biota?
Yeah, so not only am I the GM of Florida, I've been with the company probably the longest standing employee. I do a little bit of everything. So I do some of our payroll, I do some of our accounting, I do husbandry, import, export. Kind of I have my hands in a little bit of everything. So it's a multifaceted job.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So how did you kind of get into saltwater as like the industry? Like, how did you know this was your passion?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up mostly on the freshwater side. I mean, I always had freshwater tanks growing up. I never really had a saltwater tank. I went fishing a lot, and that really kind of got me really interested in nature and the oceans and things like that. And then when I went to school at Roger Williams, we had a really awesome wet lab that I was trying to work my way into. And from there, that really pioneered my interest within aquaculture and just saltwater in general.
Oh, very cool. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, your college, like at Roger Williams. Like, what was that like?
Yeah, so Roger Williams is an amazing school. It's right on the water, so you get a lot of really good hands-on experience. So it was a lot of seining, a lot of natural ocean research. But then we also had wet labs where we dealt with more ornamental side tropicals. So we kind of got the best of both worlds, and students were able to decide where they wanted to lean into. Obviously, the ornamentals are definitely a lot prettier, so many of us ended up going towards the ornamentals. But it was definitely cool to get your hands on of even just Rhode Island like native species.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, so from there, where did you go? Like, I know you have experience in like labs and also at a public university. I'm sorry, public aquariums. So how did that kind of work out?
Yeah, so my original goal at Roger was to graduate with 10 years of experience in 4 years. So I tried getting every single job I could. So I worked in the seed lab, I worked in the shellfish hatchery, the zebrafish hatchery, data entry, anything I could really get our hands on, I was just trying to do. And then from there, I ended up working. We had a partnership with the Rhode Island Audubon Society. So we also helped design exhibits there, and that gave me a lot of exhibit design experience. And I went to work at House of Finns in Greenwich, Connecticut, and they're pretty well known in the industry for kind of turning out really good talent. So our own Felicia McCulley also worked there. And it's just a good job at a college. You learn a lot about the industry of purchasing and kind of the popularity of it, while also kind of learning more about the hobby itself.
Gotcha. Now, did you work with Felicia at the same time?
No, I think I just missed her. I think I was actually hired to be her replacement.
Okay, that's actually kind of funny. All right. And then from there, you kind of went into wholesale, public aquarium. Like, how did that journey look like?
Yeah, I volunteered a little bit at public aquariums, but it was really right. I was kind of doing it while I was at House of Finns. And then from House of Finns, I ended up working when our first Florida facility just started opening.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome. So how did you know like aquaculture was your passion? Like was that just at Roger Williams, or like was there a certain moment in time that you were like, oh, I love this?
It was mostly at Roger, but I think one of my roommates when I was in like sophomore, junior year, he would breed cichlids, and we had dozens of tanks in the dorms, which weren't allowed. But he was breeding African cichlids and South American cichlids, especially like Apistogramma. And it was just cool because he brought me to a lot of his clubs. And from the clubs, everyone was like trading these fish and telling each other these secrets of how to breed them. And I just thought that was really cool that they were directly contributing to the hobby just from a dorm room or just from your house or just like this couple of tanks you have in your house. You're able to really make a difference in your local community. And I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, for sure. So I love Biota. I absolutely love what they do. I love y'all's mission. And when I first heard about Biota, I actually owned a retail store, and I was looking for more aquaculture fish that were more than just clownfish and dottybacks. Like I was looking for more unique species when I first found it, and I've been in love with Biota ever since. So, what kind of got you excited about working for Biota?
Yeah, I just thought the kind of concept of it really being different, and that's really visualize within our logo, it's a school of fish with a fish going the opposite direction. And it's just that we really see within the industry that it's a lot of the same. And although many of us kind of champion like aquaculture is the future, there's not that many actually doing it. So I felt that it was a position and a company that was really pioneering themselves within the industry to kind of take that head on and really like mature into where the hobby is trending.
Yeah, one of the things when I first was in aquaculture, just kind of doing my own little thing. And then I kind of got into more of the research world. I was amazed by how many species we know how to breed, but aren't commercialized. Like that was one of the most frustrating things. Like, meeting Andy Ryan and he was like, oh, we know how to breed, all of these different species. And I was just like, why aren't they available? And the fact that Biota is figuring out how to commercialize a lot of these species on like a large scale is just, it's pretty darn amazing and impactful for, the hobby in general. So that's just been a cool thing that you guys have been able to do.
Yeah, I think really the reason how we're able to do is because we have an incredible audience. I mean, there's people that really do believe in what we do, and even if a fish is more expensive than the wild counterpart, they're willing to spend a little bit more to keep that project going or to keep that fish captive bred rather than having to only have a wild source.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, the fact that you don't have to, worry about diseases typically, you don't have to worry about them not eating, that to me has such peace of mind. And the fact that, the fish is typically just going to, go into the aquarium a lot easier. It's not going to be as stressed and, it's kind of used to that aquarium life is pretty darn amazing.
Yeah, it's great hearing from all the clients that we have that just they think it's just so easy to have a reef tank now. Because we have a lot of newcomers that haven't been in the hobby before. They never had to go through the trials and tribulations of getting a wild fish to eat.
Yeah. Yeah. And then sometimes it's very difficult. Like I'm currently quarantining probably 70, 80 species right now of different anthias that are wild caught. And, it's really difficult getting some of them to eat, and some of them, no matter what you do, you're not going to get them to eat. Unfortunately, I do work in an aquarium, so we do pull in a lot of variety of species that aren't available. And it is kind of heartbreaking sometimes when you are doing everything you can to get a species to eat. And it is very frustrating for sure.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the disease aspect too. I mean, it's so much easier when things are captive bred.
Yeah, for sure. So for you transitioning from, the public aquarium, the wholesale, the aquaculture into a general manager role, like what did that actually look like? Was that a hard transition for you?
Yeah, I was kind of learning everything on the fly. So we're a small company, obviously. Yeah. So I mean, I really had to learn everything, and the biggest like hurdles there were import export paperwork. There's definitely a lot of nuances with that, or even just payroll and having to manage people, right? It's amazing when you have a ton of tanks around you and fish don't talk and fish don't have the same issues and intricacies as humans. So really having to get to learn that aspect of the job was definitely learning on the fly and having to make sure that worked first and foremost.
So what would you say when you kind of got this job was like your biggest surprise in being a general manager that you just didn't expect? Was there something like, oh, I had no idea it was going to be like that? Was it working with people or?
Yeah, it was a bit of working with people. And originally I was actually just brought on to be a sales rep, but we had no other employees. So then I was the sales rep, and then I was also doing husbandry on the side. I was making calls with my hands in the tanks. But it was really just trying to figure out how to manage and balance things all at once because, like, obviously the animals take the most forefront. They can't wait. They don't understand that you have to make a call or do some payroll or something. It's always taking care of the animals first and foremost. So I think making sure to dedicate the time management was a really important skill I had to kind of learn on the fly.
Yeah, that's a hard skill to learn. And it's kind of cool that Biota is a startup, really. One person has to wear numerous hats. Like, you're not just this, you are this plus everything else that needs to get done for the day. So it's really kind of cool you get to be involved in that environment.
Yeah, and it was cool because originally we were almost a totally different startup. We started up with Biota Aquarium Kit, which was bringing newcomers to the hobby in an all-in-one kit. And we do plan on going back to that in the future, but originally it was just this concept of an all-in-one sustainable aquarium for the hobby. And we've branched off from there.
Very cool. So I do want to talk a little bit about like Biota. And as far as I get a lot of questions from people who are wanting to get into aquaculture and want to do more than just clownfish or dotty backs. And they always ask, like, what species should I start with? And I'm always like, how skilled are you in phytoplankton and copepods? Like, it kind of depends on that for sure. But how does Biota select the species that they work with? Like, do you guys do a lot of in-house research, or do you partner with universities and kind of whatever species they've learned to work with, figure out how to commercialize that, or is it like a mix?
It's a bit of everything. So, like for example, like the yellow tang is probably one of the species that we're most known for, and that came by because the Oceanic Institute was breeding them, and then that project wasn't really getting any funding anymore. We kind of stepped in, but from doing that research, we really figured out how to commercialize things like hippo tangs, and we are working on similar zebrasoma, or we were able to do the convict tangs as well. And so, initial research allows us to really branch off into similar species. But in that same vein, we do have our own passions, and we do have our own species that we either want to work with, or there's definitely a need in the hobby. Like mandarins was one of those where wild caught mandarins, their survival rate is so low that we really needed to breed that species. Or court jesters, same thing. It's a fish that often ends up emaciated in the aquarium, but since they're captive bred, they eat everything. So it's a bit of what there's a need for and what we kind of have an idea of, and where we can go from there.
Absolutely. And I think it's great that you started working with mandarins, because I remember, again, I'm going to bring it up again, when I had my fish store, like everybody wants a mandarin. That's like they want clownfish and a mandarin, and they just don't do well in a lot of tanks because, they only eat copepods, they don't eat the frozen foods or whatever. And, most of your tank bred fish are going to go to a prepared diet. So even if they do eat a lot of copepods, having another food source is really, really important for them. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
I do have a question. I would imagine that there is some sort of like cost breakdown analysis. So, for example, like chromies, even though we do know how to breed them, they are fairly inexpensive as a fish. So, trying to actually breed a fish with the food costs of like the algae, all the way the copepods run for all the way through the food chain, I would imagine there are some fish that don't financially make sense. So how much does that play a part in the species that you guys kind of decide to go for? Like, now I know there's a demand analysis, like do people actually want it, but the price elasticity of what people are willing to pay, is that kind of considered with what you guys do?
It is considered, and there are times where, so with the chromis in particular, there was a breeder out in France actually that was successfully breeding some of them, and we also support other breeders around the world, and so we bought them at his cost, or whatever he thought they were worth, and we just put them up on the site to see what we would make our normal margins on. And obviously, it's way more expensive than the wild caught ones. The wild ones are so cheap, but we had an entire batch, and we didn't have a single one with Uranema. We didn't have a single single loss, and it was just something that we personally saw that was an awesome species. But the hobby may not be ready for that yet, right? Like, so it's something that we tried, and if there's no real demand for something at that price, then we either have to figure out how to do it cheaper, and there are ways to do it cheaper, or just kind of wait until the hobby is kind of ready for that species.
Yeah. And the Uranema that you've mentioned is so prevalent in wild caught chromies, to the point that I very rarely even purchase chromies because it's just not usually worth it trying to deal, with the survival rate and a fish that we know just isn't going to do very well. So I personally would pay a lot of money for a tank bred chromie, school. So I hope that's something that, either the gentleman in France continues to breed and you can purchase, or we can try to find a way to make it a little bit cheaper. Because I think that is one of those species that, it's probably not going to have a huge demand just because of the price point, but the people who understand it are going to want it for sure.
Yeah. I think some of it's like with clownfish almost, where they're primarily wild caught until they were captive bred in such great numbers that brought the pricing down. So if we find a way to be able to produce them in such great numbers that the pricing comes down, or domestically in the US with a couple different farms, then I don't see why it wouldn't be a fish that's like often captive bred.
Yeah, that would be cool. Now, you've been involved in the aquaculture side of this business for a very long time, and you have seen like a lot of trends, I'm sure, but What do you think is most exciting about aquaculture at this point in time?
Yeah, I think right now we are kind of seeing like a angelfish renaissance, right? We're seeing a lot
Yes.
of different farms around the world be able to breed various species of angelfish, whether that's our facility, Wenping Su's in Bali, my Eco Reef Creations in France, or even ORA Pro Aquatics. I mean, everyone kind of has their hand in different angelfish right now, and
Yeah.
it's really cool to see which one kind of pops up next.
Yeah, it is amazing. I know a lot of places had started breeding ahead of time, and kind of I'm sure there's a little bit of collaboration between a lot of them, and just the research in the last few years with angelfish has been really, really incredible. All so many new species coming, into the market is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think Sid kind of pioneered that a little bit before the time, which was awesome. But it really is starting to really see from his original research and a lot of original Central Pyge research that's really
Yeah.
breaking off into all these other species.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So, what are you most excited about? Are there some, whether you're working on it or somebody else, is there something that you're really excited about coming up in aquaculture?
Yeah, I mean, we always hear murmurings from either farms we work with, or definitely we have some intricacies within our own farms. We have a lot of species, especially in Palau, maybe some Anthias or other angelfish. We did just announce the Heraldai, our first batch, so that's a cool bright yellow angelfish for the hobby. Or in Hawaii, we are trying to work on commercializing more of the convict tangs because there's a need for that in the hobby, but also
Yeah.
some adjacent zebrazoma maybe.
Oh, very cool. Aquaculture has been on the cutting edge, ever since it was created. Like it's constantly pushing, new species, new food, like new techniques. It's constantly pushing that edge. So at Biota, how do you ensure that you guys are constantly at that cutting edge and not kind of like sitting on your laurels, like, all right, we did the yellow tang or, whatever angelfish. Like, how do you make sure that as a business, innovation is a really big part of what you do?
Yeah, I think that it's just that we really pride ourselves in innovation and trying to be the best and really change the industry, right? That's the big whole goal here that we are trying to change the industry as much as possible. You can't get comfortable, especially within the hobby, because once you get comfortable, anything can happen. So we have found that other aquaculture facilities really find something they're really good at and breed it into like a really, really giant, large scale commercial business. But if someone else breeds that fish, then you're competing with them,
Yeah.
right? So if we're always innovating, always breeding new species, and always, then we're never having to play catch up, and everyone is gonna have to catch up to us, basically.
Yeah. You actually brought up a good point there. So, is there conversations between, maybe this is a trade secret thing, but is there conversations like between different breeders, like, hey, I'm working on this fish. Hey, I'm working on, so you guys aren't competing with each other. And even though you're in the same kind of maybe Centropyge, you guys are working on different species. Is there any of that?
We do believe that there's like a little bit of a collaboration, especially if we see someone may have beaten us to something, and we're like, oh darn, right? We'll go on the next one. One of my closest friends that I actually went to Roger with actually is the husbandry manager at Pro Aquatics. So if I get broodstock for something, I'm like, oh, I just got this. I text him real quick, and he's like, oh, I have the spawning already. I'm like, all right, move on to the next one. You got it. Don't worry about
Next.
it.
Okay, that's actually cool. I mean, it's nice to hear you guys kind of work with each other, making sure you're not competing because price point's important, and you don't want to compete on price in aquaculture. That's not the goal here is not to drive each other to the bottom, right? And then nobody makes any money to move the innovation forward. So
Yeah,
that's pretty
exactly.
awesome. What is on the horizon for Biota? No trade secrets here, but like, what is something you're really excited about, or something that you guys are working on, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we always are working on a lot of new things. Specifically, what I can say is at our Palau facility, we are working on growing coral aquaculture. And so whether that's sexual propagation or just asexual propagation, I think our Palau facility is doing a great job at the moment.
Very
And then we
cool.
are working with some other farms that are working on some very cool changes, whether that may be pioneering into invert research, maybe some cleanup
Really?
crew kind of things, or just some other really necessary species, especially with Anthias. I feel like Anthias are somewhere where we're kind of right there. We have had some successes in the future, but not necessarily something as like a major commercial scale.
Yeah. Yeah, anthers are so hard because they're so incredibly small.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I personally love invertebrates. I love, breeding them, raising them. They're a lot of fun, but there again, there's that price point analysis. Like, what kind of makes sense with that? So that'll be interesting to see what you guys come up with and whatever price point you guys can work out with that. That's cool.
Yeah,
Now,
we
as
are
far as
seeing the
your, oh, I'm
demand.
sorry. Go ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. Yeah, we are seeing the demand for especially the cleanup crews and stuff
Yeah.
definitely go up a bit the past few years.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would absolutely love to get aquaculture cleanup crew for sure. In fact, the craziest thing, I just got a Linkia in. I won't say the company, but I got a Linkia in, and it actually had a boring snail embedded into it, and I had to do surgery to remove it. And I was like, this needs to be aquacultured. That would be so much better.
Yeah.
So, well, very, very cool. So before we wrap this up, what's a few things that maybe somebody would be surprised to learn about you personally?
Yeah, I mean, I do work a lot, so I am usually at the lab or usually at work, even at home. But when I'm not working, I mean, I have an awesome dog, an Australian Shepherd. We go to the park every single day.
That's
Super
awesome.
energetic. His name's Finn, obviously. Had to be aquatic themed.
Obviously.
I play some video games, and in my spare time, I also play board games and stuff like that, like concerts, pop punk music.
Very cool. All right. So my last question before we end this up. So if there was anybody that's wanting to get into aquaculture, whether that's just a little side gig on their thing, or maybe they want to do something commercial scale, is there any advice that you would have for them?
Yeah, I mean, just start trying. I mean, you always learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. And I think that's really important, especially with aquaculture. So if you have a species that you've really been dying to work on, I mean, just try it and then kind of go from there.
That's awesome. Now, I want to just wrap up a little bit about Biota. So, Biota sells directly to fish stores, so people can get your fish directly at any other local fish store. But also, Biota recently, I don't know how recently, I guess I'm out of date. It was probably been a couple of years ago. But you guys do sell direct to public now.
Yeah, we opened it up during COVID, actually.
Yes.
So it was, we do sell direct to public, and it also helps out stores too, because it kind of regulates the map too.
Yeah, that's pretty darn awesome. I think it's amazing that, some people aren't close to a fish store, so it is nice that you guys can still get aquacultured items to anybody, no matter where they are.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jake. I really appreciate your time and for joining us on the Tides of Business. And everyone, next week, we will have another episode. Thank you.